Back in the early 90s, I used to deliver pizza for a local spot. This one time, it was nearing the end of a Saturday night, and I found myself making a delivery to a house in darkness. As I approached the front door, the man who answered looked bewildered and annoyed that he had been disturbed so late. He claimed no one had ordered a pizza. I pressed him gently. "Are you sure?" I said. The confused look faded from his face and was now the look of anger. "Do I look like I am unsure to you?" the man said. I quickly said no, and I turned away and began the lonely walk back to my car, thinking about the tip that I wouldn't be receiving for this pizza. The silence was eerie. Just as I reached my vehicle, two figures leapt from behind the bushes, their faces obscured by ski masks. They moved with a predatory grace, one wielding a well-worn baseball bat, the other brandishing a knife that glinted menacingly in the dim light. They couldn't have been much older than high school or college age. "Give me the pizza," one of them growled, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down my spine. Without a second thought, I handed over the two large pizzas still in the warming bag. They snatched it and bolted into the nearby park, their figures swallowed by the darkness. This was the 90s, an era before cell phones were ubiquitous. I stood there, paralyzed by the surreal encounter, unsure of what to do next. Eventually, I drove back to the restaurant, my mind racing. When I recounted the incident to my manager, he simply chuckled, his laughter echoing hollowly in the empty restaurant. Two questions have lingered in my mind for over 30 years. Why didn't they take my money? I remember it vividly being the end of a Friday night, my pockets heavy with tip money, about $160, an unusually large sum. Why did they order from us? The pizza chain I worked for was mediocre at best. There were numerous better options around. If they weren't going to pay, why not choose a more expensive place? Perhaps they had a fondness for our pizzas. The ironic thing about it, had they taken my tip money, they could have treated themselves to a far superior meal. Instead, they vanished into the night with their meager prize, leaving me with a memory and my tip money. I've delivered all over Vegas, casinos, sketchy alleys, rundown apartments. You see it all in this city. But one delivery stands out, something that still gives me chills whenever I drive by that part of town. It was a slow night, just after sunset, when an order came through for a pizza to be delivered to one of those motels you hear stories about. You know the type. Cheap, nasty, probably home to guys fresh out of prison, or those looking for a place to crash while doing some shady business. Drugs, prostitution, hell, who knows? I wasn't thrilled about going there, but I needed the tips. When I pulled up, the place was even worse in person. Flickering neon sign, faded and cracked paint on the walls, and that eerie quietness that hangs heavy in the air even though you know people are inside. I walked to the room number on the ticket, the door half cracked open. That alone should have been a red flag, but I've seen stranger things. Inside, there was a man sprawled out on the bed, completely still. At first glance, he looked like any other dude who might have passed out drunk, arms hanging at odd angles, one foot on the floor. I knocked on the door frame, called out the name on the ticket. "Hey, pizza's here for Mark?" Nothing. I knocked louder. "Mark? You awake?" Still nothing. Not even a stir. I stepped closer, feeling uneasy. The smell of stale cigarette smoke and sweat hung heavy in the room. Suddenly, a door across the hall creaked open, and this guy stepped out, eyeing me curiously. He asked if everything was all right, so I told him the guy inside wasn't answering. His expression changed like he knew something, but I couldn't place what. He claimed to know the guy on the bed, Mark, and without a word, he walked straight into the room, shaking him by the shoulder. "Hey, Mark. Wake up, man." But Mark didn't wake up. That's when the pit in my stomach dropped. I've seen drunk people. I've seen high people. But this guy? Something was off. His skin looked pale, way too pale, almost like wax. The neighbor started to panic, pulling out his phone and dialing 911. My heart was pounding in my chest as I backed out of the room, trying to process what was happening. A dead guy? In a seedy motel room? And I'm the one who just delivered pizza to him? The cops and EMS showed up within minutes, and that's when it all became real. I watched as they entered the room, checked his pulse, and shook their heads. The guy on the bed, Mark, was dead. The police interviewed both me and the guy from across the hall. They kept asking if we'd noticed anything suspicious. Honestly, the whole thing felt suspicious, but nothing about Mark's body screamed foul play. It looked like a heart attack, or maybe a drug overdose. They didn't say much. Here's where it gets weird. After all the commotion, the guy from across the hall, the same guy who claimed to know Mark, turns to me, completely unfazed, and asks if he can pay for the pizza. "Well," he says with this eerie calmness, "he's not gonna eat it. I'll take it off your hands." I just stared at him, dumbfounded. I didn't know what to say. I mean, who the hell asks for a dead guy's pizza like that? It felt wrong, like this guy wasn't surprised at all by what had just happened. I handed him the pizza, not wanting to argue, and he gave me cash. More than enough to cover it too. As I left, I couldn't shake this nagging feeling. What if this guy knew more than he was letting on? What if he didn't just discover Mark? Maybe they'd been drinking or doing drugs together, and when Mark dropped dead, this guy freaked and ordered a pizza, hoping I'd be the one to stumble upon the body. A scapegoat. It was the perfect setup. He could play the good neighbor, the concerned friend, while I unknowingly walked into a scene straight out of a crime show. I never found out what really happened to Mark. Maybe it was just bad luck, a heart attack, or an overdose, or maybe there was something more to it. But I'll tell you one thing. Every time I drive past that motel, I get this cold chill down my spine, remembering that open door, the still body on the bed, and the guy who was just a little too eager to take the pizza. It started out like any other shift at Papagino's Pizzeria. I was on delivery duty like usual, hustling to pay for classes and rent. I was a junior at State, working evenings, and my life revolved around pizzas, textbooks, and a beat-up scooter that made every pothole feel like a life decision. That night, the last delivery was to some trailer park at the edge of town. I'd been there before, but this time, it was to a different unit, number 18. The place always gave me the creeps. It wasn't exactly the Ritz, if you catch my drift. The kind of spot where lawn chairs double as living room furniture. But, hey, everyone's gotta eat, right? Pizza is universal. As I approached, I noticed a few things. The grass, if you could call it that, was overgrown. There were random objects scattered in the yard, and an old 1970s pickup truck with one tire left sat there getting rustier by the second. The trailer itself had seen better days. Its white paint had faded to a dirty beige, peeling in large patches, and the windows were grimy. It was dark, except for a flickering porch light that buzzed like it was struggling to survive the night. I knocked on the door, half expecting it to fall off its hinges, and waited. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Then I heard it, low growling, followed by a series of barks that sounded like they came from a pack of angry lions. I stiffened up, gripping the pizza box like a shield. That's when the door swung open, revealing her. An old lady, probably in her 70s, with a face so wrinkled it looked like she'd been left in the sun too long. She was wearing a faded housecoat and a pair of fuzzy slippers that might have been white once upon a time. Her hair was thin and wiry, frizzed out like she had touched a live wire. But it wasn't her that caught my attention. It was the 6 huge pit bulls circling her ankles, tails wagging but eyes sharp, like they were sizing me up for dinner. You ordered a pizza?" I managed, my voice cracking a little. "Yeah, I ordered a pizza," she muttered, eyes narrowing. Then she stepped aside. "Come on, boy. Get in here before the bugs do." I hesitated, but I couldn't refuse. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first, like musty blankets and old dog. The floor was littered with dog toys and chewed up bones. The pit bulls circled me, sniffing, their eyes never leaving me. "That'll be $11.99, I said, trying to keep calm. "I ain't got no cash," she replied. "You'll just have to wait until my check comes in." "Ma'am, I can't leave without the money." She flopped onto the couch, reaching for the remote. "Well, you ain't leaving either unless you're planning to walk those dogs." My stomach sank. "I really need to..." "Relax," she said, cutting me off. "They're friendly if you don't act scared." I sat, gripping the pizza like it was my last defense, while the pit bulls settled at my feet. My heart pounded. "Look, how about I leave the pizza and you can pay me tomorrow?" I offered, desperate. She eyed me. "You trust me to pay?" I nodded quickly. "Sure, no problem." She cackled. "Boy, you're something else." "Fine, leave the pizza." I stood slowly, placing the pizza on a table. One of the dogs blocked my way, sniffing at my shoes as I edged toward the door. My fingers brushed the doorknob. "You better come back tomorrow," she called after me, "or I'll sick the whole pack on you." I didn't need to hear more. As soon as I got outside, I bolted to my scooter and sped off, heart racing. Safe at last, I realized something. She knew exactly what she was doing, keeping me trapped in there. And for the record, I never went back for that money.
If you would like to hear more stories and support this channel, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching.